Hello, I am taking on a challenge to beat every playable Nintendo published game. Welcome to the next episode. The next game is Famicom Grand Prix F-1 Race. Today we're taking a look at Nintendo's second game in their F-1 Race series, although as we'll soon see, this one was pretty different from the first F-1 Race. This game was another exclusive to Japan, and it released on the Famicom Disk System. Like Nintendo's recent FDS golf titles, Nintendo hosted tournaments where players could submit their times to Nintendo through DiskFax kiosks for a chance to win a prize. I do find it a bit odd that Nintendo never brought any of their Famicom games in the F1 Race series to the West. In my video on Rad Racer, I postulated the idea that Nintendo of America was searching for racers that were more similar to Sega's Outrun, and that games like Famicom Grand Prix F1 Race didn't really fit the bill. Another possible reason, though, was that maybe the effort to remove all the in-game references to the tournament was not worth it to Nintendo of America. So, what were the tournament rewards like for this one? Well, from what I can gather, they split the rewards into 4 categories, one for each of the 4 difficulty levels in the game. For each category, the people who placed first through 100th earned a special trophy, which, once again, I couldn't find any pictures of. However, if you placed anywhere from 1st to 1,500th, you earned a deluxe version of Game & Watch Super Mario Bros. That came in a special case. Additionally, an extra 1,000 players would get the Game & Watch at random if the last 2 digits of their time was equal to the last 2 digits of the person in first. Another thing players received just for participating was a mock license. Interestingly, these licenses shared your placement compared to everyone else, so we can actually use these to know how many people sent in scores for each of the difficulties. There were 67,578 people who submitted scores for level 1, 14,995 submissions for level 2, 11,790 submissions for level 3, and 8,282 submissions for level 4. Wow, that's a pretty big drop off between levels 1 and 2. I wonder if it's more difficult to reach the end of level 2 or something. Anyway, the most interesting prize here is the Game & Watch. Not only did the casing look different from the crystal screen version, but it also featured improved sprites compared to the original game. Since they only made 10,000 of these, they are a prized item for any Game & Watch collector. Now, I actually will be playing the version with the updated sprites eventually, as this version was released in the new widescreen series in 1988. One final thing I want to point out here is that we've got Mario on the cover. Like Nintendo's Golf series, we're starting to see this franchise morph into a Mario franchise, and I've even seen people call this one a precursor to the Mario Kart series as a result. Humorously, Mario's all over the place in this game. The main driver looks like Mario, as does everyone else in the pit crew. However, there actually are some other characters that aren't Mario, the enemy racers. While they only look like cars in-game, the manual actually gives full-on portraits of these guys. Man, leave it to the Famicom Disk System to have some of the most obscure Mario characters. Next time someone asks you for some obscure video game trivia, tell them all about the Mario character Bronco Machini from Italy. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's jump into my time with the game. For some reason, when I played this game, I completely overlooked that it had an English patch, so I played it in Japanese. Fortunately, there's a bunch of English sprinkled in, so I hardly even noticed. Similar to the FDS golf games, I started off by taking a look at the competition screens. All I really gained from this was that there are 4 levels to the game, as I mentioned before. Once I selected the Game Start option, I could pick between a Grand Prix mode and a Time Trial mode. While I still wanted to check out the Time Trial mode eventually, I figured the Grand Prix mode was the main mode, so I started there. Immediately, I was taken to a shop. Whoa, this is already a lot more complex than what I was expecting. Down at the bottom, we can see that I had 50 of some kind of money. Apparently, the Japanese here is actually used to denote $10,000, so this 50 actually means that I had $500,000. Additionally, we can see that the shop had 12 cars in total. These were split into 4 different tiers of prices, with each tier having 3 different types of cars. These cars have all kinds of different stats. First off, there's power, which I think more or less represents how fast you can go. I'm not sure if this tells you acceleration, top speed, or both, but either way, the higher the number is, the better your car will perform in the race. In the top middle, there's the turbo indicator. This tells you whether or not the car is capable of turbo. Turbo is an option that lets you accelerate beyond top speeds at the cost of more resources. At the top right is fuel efficiency. Basically, while you drive, you are constantly using up fuel and you'll need to take a pit stop to refill if you get low. In the middle is body durability. The more you ram into objects like the walls and other cars, the more your body durability goes down. Similar to the fuel, this will need to be repaired at a pit stop if it gets low. On the bottom is tire durability. Like fuel, this basically just always goes down while you drive, making your car harder to control as tire durability lowers. I think it goes down more while you're off-road too. Once it hits the bottom, you don't immediately lose like if your fuel or body damage hits 0, but controlling becomes so terrible that you'll basically always want to make sure you pit stop enough to keep your tires in good shape. Finally, there's an indicator as to whether or not the tires are for wet terrain or dry terrain. You'll basically always want to use a car with dry tires unless you run into a stage with rain. One comment I want to make on these stats is that by far, tire durability was always the first of the 3 bars to get low. Since fuel, body durability, and tire durability are all repaired by pit stops, this essentially meant that fuel efficiency and body durability didn't matter to me at all. It's a bit disappointing to see some of the stats matter so little, but I haven't played anything with car stats this complex, so I'll cut the game some slack for being an early racing game to do customization like this. I was confused a bit at first and bought one of the $300,000 cars by mistake, but I decided to just roll with it. The biggest issue with this car though was that its tire durability was terrible, which we'll soon see makes a huge difference. I started with level 1, and as we can see, the perspective of this game is completely different from F1 Race. This one is a top-down racer. One of the first things I noticed though was that the turning was a bit awkward. The game turns your car quite a bit with each press of the button, so it was really tough to make micro adjustments. This plagued me for pretty much the entirety of the game, as it made it really hard to navigate around the enemy cars. Also, before getting into this game too much, the flickering was really bad here. It's pretty rough, but I just had to deal with it. Anyway, on the bottom screen, we can see a bunch of stats. We've got all the durability bars I mentioned before, my current speed, current time at high score, my current placement, how many laps remain, and a map. On the topic of my placement, there's a bunch of cars in the game, but the main goal is to get in front of the cars with unique colors. These are the ones shown on the map, and they are the characters from the manual. My first race went pretty rough. The turning was just so difficult to get used to. During lap 2, my tires already went out and it got even worse, although I did make it to the pit stop. The pit stops are pretty rough in this because I don't think the CPUs visit the pit stops at all. This makes it so much harder to get ahead. But hey, at least you get a funny cutscene of a bunch of Mario lookalikes hard at work. Anyway, my tires went out again during lap 4 and I ended up in 7th place, right behind all the named racers. I somehow still qualified for race 2, but as we can see by this number below, I didn't place high enough to earn any money. Course 2 went even worse. I just kept running out of tire durability. I even made a pretty dumb pit stop right before finishing the last lap, which definitely didn't help. I got 13th place, which was enough to boot me out of the Grand Prix. In this difficulty, you have to be at least 9th place to keep going. As you pick harder difficulties, the position you need to reach to qualify gets harder and harder. On that note, this game doesn't actually keep track of your overall placements or anything, as getting a high enough position on each race is the only condition to beat a level. This qualification requirement is likely what kept so many people out of the later difficulties, as you have to earn better cars to even stand a chance. Well, that was only my first attempt, so I decided to try again to see if I could do better and maybe at least earn a bit more extra money. However, things only went marginally better on my next try. I got 7th again on track 1 and 9th on track 2. This finally brought me to track 3, but I still wasn't earning a dime. Track 3 was another simple 4-lap race, but once again, the low durability of my tires wrecked me, and I ended up in 10th place getting disqualified again. Realizing that the tire durability was causing the problem, I decided to try out one of the other cars instead. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough money for one of the other $300,000 cars, so I had to go with a $100,000 car instead. This one wasn't quite as fast and it had a weaker body, but at least the tires were more durable. This car ended up being not that much better than my first car, but that extra tire durability made just enough of a difference. Now I only had to make one pit stop per race, and I was able to get through each race without my tires ever going out. However, the car still didn't perform that much better, so I still never scored high enough to earn any money. That being said, I did finally get through track 3 by barely squeezing out a 9th place. On to the final track of level 1. Track 4 had a kind of rough windy section near the end, and I barely managed to squeeze out a 9th place. While my times weren't all that great, that basically meant I beat level 1. Like I said before, there's not any final placements or anything, so all you need to do is earn a high enough place on each track to complete each level. So, with that, I officially had a score for level 1 that I could have submitted to Nintendo. After this, I decided to try out level 2. However, considering I still didn't have enough money to buy a better car, I was kind of worried. Similar to F1 Race, the first few circuits of each level are actually repeats from the previous level. Here, you are started on Circuit 3. I tried out my first car again, but I did so bad that I just gave up after the first lap. I decided to take a break from the Grand Prix mode here and try out the time trial mode. In this mode, you pick from one of 6 circuits with a preset car, and you could customize some options like changing the laps or whether or not you have turbo. The circuits in the time trial mode are actually unique to this mode, but it's not like there's any goal here besides do better than your previous best. I tried out Circuit 1, but after a quick race, I went back to the Grand Prix mode. Alright, I've really got to figure out how to earn some cash. I spent some time away from the game and decided to do some more research on it. It turns out I was missing a core mechanic the entire time. At first, you hold A to accelerate, but then, once you reach a fast enough speed, you switch to holding B. This was basically meant to emulate switching between high and low gear. During that entire previous session, I was only holding A, so I wasn't going nearly as fast as I could have been. I thought pressing B was to brake, but it turns out this is because I was pushing A and B at the same time, which was the input to brake. I actually didn't realize about the turbo until this point either, which my $300,000 car was capable of doing. It's kind of wild I was even able to beat level 1 like this. With all of this new knowledge under my belt, I decided to try out level 1 again just to see how much better I could do, and well, let's just say I did quite a bit better. On my very first race, I got first place, which finally earned me some sweet cash. Unfortunately, it was still only $100,000, which didn't seem like much in the grand scheme of things. I guess I needed to win at the harder circuits if I wanted to earn more money. On race 2, I got second place, which nabbed me $80,000. Looks like you get varying amounts of money based on how good you do too. On circuit 3, I got first again, and this time I got a whopping $300,000. Nice. On race 4, I only got 5th, but this still got me $200,000. Finally, the cash was starting to flow in. I decided to take a look at the shop now, and I realized something I missed last time I played. After beating level 1, the shop updates with a new row of cars. Now there are 3 more cars that cost $5 million each. Yeesh, this is going to be grindy, isn't it? Unfortunately, I didn't even have enough money for the next tier of cars, but I decided to just try out the second level anyway, considering I actually knew how to play now. Even though level 2 starts with a repeat of circuit 3 from level 1, I think the enemy cars are all more difficult here. I got 5th place instead of the first place I got on circuit 3 in level 1, earning me only $100,000 instead of the $300,000 I got before. But hey, at least I still qualified. The next race was circuit 4 again, the one with that windy section. I ended up getting 6th place, which earned me $100,000. However, $20,000 were taken off as a penalty for some reason. What the heck? What did I do to earn a penalty? Honestly, I still don't even know. Alright, time for a new circuit, Circuit 5. This one has a loop with a bridge where 2 of the roads cross. This doesn't change too much, although it is easier to bonk into the walls during these sections. My tire durability was starting to become a problem again as I barely squeezed by with an 8th place. I moved on, but I didn't earn any cash. To make matters worse, I got another $20,000 penalty here, which made me go under $1 million, the amount required for the next level of cars. What a bummer. Next up was Circuit 6. There wasn't anything too interesting here other than a few sharp U-turns. I got another 8th place here, earning me 0 cash, and somehow I got another $20,000 penalty. However, despite losing all this money, I had officially finished level 2. This once again added more cars to the shop, and these ones were a whopping $10 million each, and I still didn't even have enough money for the $1 million cars, which are now the cheapest cars in the shop. I decided to do another run on level 1 since that seemed to be where I could earn the most money right now. Afterwards, I finally had enough cash for a new car. The new car I bought wasn't actually any faster than my previous one, but it had twice as much tire strength. I decided to try level 2 again to give this new car a spin and to see if I could earn more money with it. Unfortunately, the improvements only seemed to be marginal, which I should have guessed considering it had the same amount of power as my previous car. I kind of just barely made it through level 2 again, so I knew I didn't stand a chance at level 3. Because of this, I decided to grind level 1 some more, and boy did I start grinding. Honestly, most of my time playing this game was spent grinding for more cars. I decided to skip over the tier 3 cars and jump straight into tier 4. When I finally had enough money, I had a bit of a tough call to make here. There were 2 cars I was looking at, both with the highest tire durability. One was faster, but it had abysmal body durability. I ended up playing it safe and went for the slightly slower, but more durable car. Retroactively, I'm not sure if that was the right call, considering I never really had issues with body durability anyway. With this new, faster car, I decided to finally try level 3. Once again, this one started with the circuit that came halfway through level 2, Circuit 5. Unfortunately, even with this new car, I still didn't do so hot. I got 7th place, which at this difficulty was already enough to disqualify me. Ouch. I decided to try level 2 with this new car though, and thankfully my car was good enough that I was able to earn more money with each run now. However, before going back to grinding, I decided to give level 3 a few more attempts just to see if all I needed to do was get better at the game. It ended up taking me a while, but I finally managed to beat Circuit 5 and and 6 on level 3, taking me to Circuit 7, a new course. This stage was actually really simple. It had one kind of windy section near the end, but most of it was just straightaways. I even managed to beat it on my first try. Maybe I stand a chance at level 3 with this car after all? Unfortunately, on Circuit 8, I finally encountered something I hadn't seen yet. The road conditions for this circuit were wet, and I hadn't bought a single car with wet tires yet. Not only that, but this stage was just kind of tough too. There were multiple loops and all kinds of windy turns. My tires did terribly here. I ended up in 9th place, meaning I failed to finish level 3. Bummer. I guess it was time to grind up for a new car for this stage alone. Unfortunately, none of the cars in the 5 million tier had wet tires, so I guess I had to save up for one of the $10 million cars instead. It took me about an hour of grinding on level 2, but eventually I had enough for this brand new car. This new car ended up being really good. On my next attempt on level 3, I managed to beat that final race, getting a score of 4th place. Out of curiosity, I attempted level 4 immediately after, and I decided to try something kind of silly. I was curious to how this new car with wet tires would perform on a dry stage. Sure, it wasn't the right type of tire, but maybe its speed will be good enough to carry me through. I spent a lot of money on this thing after all. It turns out, despite having the wrong type of tires, it actually did pretty good. Once again, level 4 starts with the last 2 stages of level 3, circuits 7 and 8. I managed to get through these 2 circuits on my first try with the new car. Up next was a new stage, Circuit 9, and this one was another dry stage. I decided to use my new car with the wet tires anyway, just to see if it could actually take me all the way. This circuit was honestly pretty simple, with just a few windy parts here and there. Somehow my new car was still good enough to carry me through, despite not having the proper kind of tires. I barely qualified with the 6th place and moved on to the final race, Circuit 10. Can this car actually take me the whole way? Well, the final circuit was another wet course, so I might actually stand a chance. This circuit has one section with a bunch of U-turns in the middle, but other than that, it wasn't so bad. Unfortunately, it still wasn't looking all that good for me. I started the last lap in 8th place, and I needed to be in 6th to qualify and win. At first, I had trouble getting past anyone, but as I was getting to the final sections of the race, I actually started to pass a few cars. My tires ended up getting super low on durability, but somehow I did it. With my tires completely shot, I swerved my way back and forth into the finish line in 6th place. Just barely a good enough placement to beat level 4. Phew. It had been a while since I took a look at the shop, and 2 whole rows had been added since I was last there. I guess even beating level 4 unlocks a new tier of cars too. The most expensive cars were $50 million each. Yeesh. There weren't any more difficulties to beat, so I guess these shiny new cars were there to help you get a better time for the competition. However, I'm not even able to participate in the competition, and I think beating all 4 levels is a good win condition for this game. I still wanted to check out the remaining stages in the time trial mode, so I did a quick lap on all 6 courses, and there's not a whole lot to talk about here, with one exception. For some reason, Circuit 6 was just a huge wide open area. I guess this one just existed for you to play around in? I decided to use this stage to test out what actually happens if your body durability and fuel ran out. In both cases, you basically just stop moving and are booted out of the stage. With that, my time with Famicom Grand Prix F1 race was complete. On to the review. Well, this one was certainly interesting. There's a lot more to this game than the other racing games I played up until this point. Having a shop where you can buy different types of cars with different stats is pretty cool, and it added a layer of depth that I haven't seen in any of the racing games yet. Unfortunately, it did end up being a bit too grindy at times, and I spent a significant amount of time just doing level 1 over and over until I could finally afford a decent car. The actual racing is a bit rough too. The turning just doesn't feel great, as you're pretty limited in how precise your turns can be. The stages were designed in a way that largely accounts for this, but it was kind of a problem when it came to getting around the other cars. Sometimes I would just intentionally ram into the other cars because it seemed like an easier way to get past them without losing control. All in all, it's an interesting racing game, but it doesn't quite reach its full potential. The shop system is pretty cool, and I kinda like that they tried something different with a top-down perspective, but it's a bit too grindy and the controls just don't feel all that great. I gave the game a 6 out of 10. With Famicom Grand Prix F1 race complete, I have now finished 56 out of the 148 NES games in the challenge, meaning I am now 37.84% of the way through all of the NES games. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more of these in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss out on the next one. Also leave a like if you enjoyed it, since it will help the channel grow and motivate me to continue this series. I hope I will see you in the next step of my quest to beat every Nintendo game.